even from like feminism standpoint, and I think the extremists of the red pill community is honestly like the opposing force of feminism. Um, but it's easy to look at men and say men are the reason why I'm this way, and I think it's easy for men to look at women and say they're the reason why I'm this way. But I think each person needs to look at themselves and say, how have I contributed to societal problems, and how can I be better? I think that's the only way that we're actually going to move forward. If everybody keeps pointing fingers at everyone else, it takes accountability away from yourself.
Yeah.
So I need to look at myself and say, Abby, how can you be better? How can you make sure the things that you see that you don't like, how are you not going to perpetuate that moving forward? Hey y'all, welcome to Pain and Purpose Podcast. It's our first episode.
Woo!
This is a podcast where we talk about whatever we want to talk about. I am Abby.
I'm Nadia.
And we have some good topics for today. I'm excited. So we're going to start off with this quote I found. I'm sorry, not a quote, but a study that I found by Institute for Family Studies. So it says, in America today, around 70 people cohabit before marriage, and almost 90% have sex before they marry.
90%.
That's a big number.
I think one of the biggest things is now people don't have a respect for marriage, and they don't think that marriage is something that you should work toward. If that makes sense. Like, people are already living like they're married, like they're moving in together, they're already having sex for marriage, like before marriage. So it's like, what's the point of marriage? If that makes sense.
Yeah. But I guess still, like, what has led to that?
I think one of the biggest things is social media. Like, you see a lot of these YouTube couples that get houses together, having like children together, and it's like, it's pushed a lot to just go ahead and have sex. Like, if you've been together for a long period of time, like, why not just go ahead and have sex? Like, what's the point of waiting until marriage if you found the right person?
Yeah. I think too, on the social media piece, a lot of promiscuity is promoted now in our music.
Yeah.
In our TV media. Like, it's so normalized that...
It's an app for that.
What app is that?
OnlyFans.
Oh. What app? Yeah, there's apps like OnlyFans, which are blowing up. And I think it's teaching our young girls and our young boys from such an early age that we don't value ourselves anymore.
Yeah.
In the same way that we used to. Because in the old days, not even super old, like I said, just 100 years ago, it was like women weren't showing most of their bodies. They weren't wearing super fitted clothes. It was scandalous to have, certain things showing. So I think there's been a big change that's caused a lot of promiscuity and sexual activity and desire in our younger ages. And there's actually a video of a woman, her name is Shahrazad Ali, and she was saying, like, one of the most important roles as parents is to prevent your children from being exposed prematurely to, like, sex and sexual desire. And I don't think we do that anymore. And I think a big part of it is people having sex outside of marriage, because in that same study, it said 40% of children were born from unwed women.
Yeah.
And then, and you can speak on that, and I don't necessarily think this has been your situation, but a lot of women get to a point where when their daughters get to a certain age, they start giving them the short skirts, and they can have boyfriends, and they're just doing the same thing that got them into the position that they were in, where they ended up having sex at an early age, getting pregnant at an early age, those different things, they're setting their daughters and sons up to do that same thing. So it's like perpetuating the same problem.
Yeah. Like me, I was born from a single mother. She never like encouraged me to like wear like short skirts or nothing like that. Like she always told me to respect myself. Um and as far as like guys and stuff, like I don't know, like times are different now. Like when I was growing up, I really wasn't focused like on guys like that much. Like I like guys, but it wasn't like that's my sole focus. Like I need to be dressing for them. Like I was outside having fun.
Yeah.
Like I really wasn't thinking about guys at that time. Um and two, like I do think it really does stem from a lack of like self respect because to allow yourself to just have multiple different body partners and it's talked about so like casually now like
Yeah.
if you have 100+ bodies it's like oh I just get like I think that's very disturbing to hear being young and hearing like a lot of like older women or people my age saying like they have more bodies than their actual age like
Yeah.
I think that's a little far.
And I think the sexual liberation movement of like, I can do what I want, I can be whatever I want, I can have sex as much as I want, and it's not doing any damage to me is not true.
Yeah.
And we need to stop lying to ourselves and pretending like there are not pros and cons to having multiple sex partners. The only pro that I could probably think of is that you may become more skilled.
Yeah.
Other than that, and that's if that's valued.
Yeah.
Like a man may not value a woman who is more skilled in the bedroom.
Yeah.
They may want to build those experiences together. But that's if we're talking generally about pros and cons. That's the only one that I could think of. But as far as cons, there seems like there are so many more, like psychological damage, emotional damage.
Yeah.
Physically, you could be exposed to a lot of different things. And let's not even talk about diseases. Just your pH balance can be thrown off. So there's so many things that we don't talk about that aren't said, and we're just and I think too, like we present these things like kids to the kids, they see like sexual liberation, we can do it, and it's okay, and children are children. They're not going to look deeper into things. They're going to be like, oh, you said that's fun and that's good? Like, let me go do it.
Yeah.
Like, if you see me eating a popsicle and it's delicious and I keep telling you it's good, you're not going to go look and be like, oh, it has this many calories and it's made from red dye 40 and like all these different things. You're just going to eat the popsicle
You're not going to
too.
think it's bad for you.
Yeah, and especially when it's coming from an older generation. So I think a big part is, you know, the parents. I think parents are getting younger, so it's children raising children.
Yeah.
So, you know, I think, and another one, don't get me started on, we already said social media, but you mentioned something. You said when you were younger, you were playing outside. Like, you weren't too worried about boys. We've learned to get our validation from social media and strangers on the internet.
Yeah.
As opposed to building relationships in the real world.
Yeah.
And what gets more validation on the internet if you're talking about something wholesome or if you post a sexy photo?
Yeah, scandalous picture.
Yeah. So, I mean, you could go see wholesome dressed women all day. They don't get any type of, they may get a little attention.
Yeah.
But then you will go to the OnlyFans type of girl or the BBL type of girl, and they have all types of likes and from women and men. So I'm not putting it on either sex, but
I think that's kind of like contradictory too, because although men will like that type of picture, they don't want to bring that home to their mama. Like that, the kind of like OnlyFans models and social media models and stuff like that, like. Although, like, they may like a picture, like, you may look cute, you may look good.
Yeah.
Those are the type of women that are getting wifed. Like, you won't make a good housewife. Because you're, at this point, what is supposed to be mine, you're letting the whole world see. So it's no secrecy as to what is going on. Like, everybody can see your body. So what sets you out apart from every other woman?
Yeah. And I think that's a good point to bring up. And I think even in that, as we said before, like, we are both saving ourselves.
Mm-hmm.
There are some cons, I guess you would say, that people don't necessarily consider. Like, for example, it's talked about on the internet all the time. Like, a lot of men are like, well, we want a virgin, or we want a woman who has 5 or less sexual partners, things like that. But specifically for me as a virgin, when you meet men, they value that you're a virgin, but they also will not stay with you because you're a virgin, because they think it's more or less the mindset like, I got to you before someone else did. And now that we're together, you're not, like, what I'm trying to say is, like, I'm still saving myself for marriage. Like, we're not going to have sex. Yeah. So even if you've had sexual partners before, don't think just because you met me and I'm a virgin, now, like, you get to be the first one. No, you only get to be the first one and the only one if we get married.
Yeah.
So, and I guess it's not necessarily a con, because those guys may not be for you.
Yeah.
But it is a deterrent for a lot of men, because let's not, play. It's hard for women to wait. It's hard for men to wait. Yeah. And especially if you've been exposed to that already, then it's even harder, because, you know what it is. Yeah. But yeah, so I think there are some ups and some downs. On the upside, I've never had a man disrespect me. Like, you can't.
Yeah.
And I think going back to the family thing, like, I was raised in a 2-parent household. My parents are still together. A very stable family dynamic. And, I was taught from childhood to keep yourself for marriage. Mm-hmm. And since then, I've honored that. My siblings have honored that. Like, all of the young adults that I know pretty much have honored that. So, like, I live in a community of people where that is the standard. And I know that's not necessarily normal, but that was my normal. So I think being in a community of people that have those same standards is great. But I would definitely say, like, it's funny. I feel personally like, and sometimes it's been said to me, but I am the type of girl, and you can speak for yourself, but I'm usually the type of girl that parents love and that men want their daughters to be like. But sometimes I feel like I get overlooked because I'm not the OnlyFans type of look.
Yeah.
Like, I'm just normal. Like,
yeah. Like,
we're normal girls, so I think, but, I think it's got its pros and cons, like everything else.
Honestly, for me, like, with the dating life, I think one thing for me is, like, I'm afraid that the guy that I get with, although you may tell me you would like to wait or you don't mind waiting, will you actually wait? Like, and my thing is, like with marriage, I don't really want to wait like 5 to 10 plus years until we get married, because we're not having sex.
Yeah.
But it's just like, I'm afraid that the guy that I date won't actually wait with me. Like, he may cheat on me. I may know, I may not know. Like, that's one thing that I'm afraid of. Like, will you actually wait with me if you're not a virgin? If you are a virgin, like, I don't know, like, I guess, like, how long until we get married? Like, because I feel like, as a woman, maybe, like, a couple of months, I'll say, like, we know, like, I could see myself marrying you. And I feel like for a guy, too, like, early on, you can see if that's the type of woman you would like to spend the rest of your life with.
Yeah.
So, waiting 5+ years, no.
And I've been in situations where I've been with someone who initially said they would wait, and they were not a virgin. But when push comes to shove, they didn't. So I understand that fear. And I think, especially with me being 28, it may be even less common to find somebody my age or older that's going to wait a year or more. Like it's going to be a minimum of a year for marriage, but a year or more to have sex, especially if you've already been sexually active. So I don't really know a lot of older male virgins.
Yeah.
But I mean, I know they're out there, and I would love to find that. I know they think like some women like that are virgins want somebody who's experienced. No, like I'm more than happy to marry a virgin,
and I like to experience that together. Like that's really what sex was intended, like for men and women who are virgins who come together and experience sex together. Yeah, because your body becomes one.
And they say, I can't remember the exact study, that people that save themselves for marriage have a higher percentage of staying together versus, people who don't. So I think there are a lot of pros to saving yourself. But I don't know. I keep thinking about social media. I think social media is going to be the death of us. Like, if I could snap and remove all social media, and I know there are goods for social media, but if I could snap and remove all social media, I would. Because I think I grew up in a generation where I remember like playing outside, like having neighborhood friends, playing kickball, and doing all those things, and they just don't exist anymore. Like, I work with youth now in different situations, and like trying to get them off those phones and get focused, or even for fun. Like, we could be out bowling or like at the park, whatever it is. They just want to be on the phones, and I think it's created this addiction that in turn leads to these other things. And if we can't pull back and see the problems with it, then it's really going to be our detriment.
I was just going to say too, as a baby, like, we didn't have like phones.
Yeah.
Nowadays, babies are coming out of the womb and they're reaching for tablets, phones, iPads. And although I do feel like social media plays a big part in like having sex before marriage and not saving yourself, I also feel like too, not having a father or a father figure around to talk to you about, I guess, like what men would want in a woman, or like it's okay to save yourself. I do feel like that also plays a part too. Luckily for me, I did have good men around who, would talk to me and like tell me like it's okay to save yourself and encourage me to save myself. Yeah. But I do feel like, to a certain extent, I do feel like that is like the absent father is becoming more of an excuse, like rather than saying like what it is. If that makes sense. So like people will say like, oh, I didn't grow up with a daddy, so I'm looking or I'm searching for that father figure in men. And although that can be true, and that is true for some cases, I do feel like they use that as a crutch to be promiscuous.
Yeah, I think.
Because I do feel like I could have fallen into that and been out here giving my body to people, but I also feel like too, it was a community, like you said, it was a community. Oh my gosh, it was a community that made being a virgin the norm. So it wasn't like, oh my god, like it just, I don't know, like it just made me feel normal. Like it was not normal for people to like to have sex. Like it's like wow, but for us, it's like that's the norm. So it's easier for me to save myself.
Yeah. I think having that excuse, and it's a valid one. Like, if you grew up in a fatherless home and you're looking for that love in every other man you find, it's a valid excuse. But once you identify that, it's now your responsibility to fix it.
Like, once like, you say that,
now you know.
Yeah.
Like, if you're just acting in it and you're not realizing, then that's a different thing.
Yeah.
But if you are acting in it and you know, I'm looking for love in all these people because I didn't have a dad in the home. If you know that, then it's now your responsibility to get the help you need, whether that's a therapist or, whatever.
But I feel like, how far do you need to go to realize that, though? Like, after what point of looking and longing for that and you're not getting that, at what point do you say, like, let me reflect on myself, like, let me get help from someone else? Like, at what point do you take responsibility and take reins, like, over your life? Because you can't keep blaming your absent father for that.
And you know what? One thing I will say, maybe a good about social media, is the more prevalence that social media has in our lives, the less that becomes an excuse. Mm-hmm. Because the earlier on like you see women saying, I didn't have a dad in my home, so I was looking for love in all these other ways. So as a young person who also doesn't have a dad in their home, they should be able to watch that and be like, oh, okay, I need to look out for this.
And that's one thing that actually helped me too, because I was seeing like a lot of women say that, and I grew up without my father in the home.
Were you, when you were growing up, which you didn't get into promiscuity, but when you were growing up, were you presently thinking about that? Like, let me be sure that I'm not building attachments with men on the pretense of I'm looking for love from this person because I feel like I'm not getting it from a different source.
Honestly, it did the opposite. Like, I was conscious about, like, not giving myself, like, not giving my body to men. But on the back burner, it's like, if I did that, I would be in the same predicament that my mom is in. Mm-hmm. And I could potentially get pregnant and have a child and have that same cycle repeat itself. And I think, like, that's really one of the biggest reasons why I am saving myself, is because I don't want to continue the cycle. Like, the cycle ends with me. I don't want to have a child out of wedlock and have that child potentially grow up without a father in the home. And I think that's very important. And I think people overlook that. Like, a 2-parent household stability, like, I think that is very conducive for a child. And like I said, like, growing up, sex was not on my mind. Because it was nowhere. Like, it was in movies, but I couldn't watch that. Like,
yeah,
it was like turn your head or cover your eyes. Now kids are just like watching it and it's fine, but like it's in music a lot, like more. Mm-hmm. I wasn't able to listen to music unless like I snuck and did it. Like, it wasn't like the norm that I was like surrounded by sex. So sex was nowhere like on my mind. And I just think now, like, I do think now they're pushing it for a reason. I don't understand what the reason is to introduce sex to younger kids, though. I don't understand that. I would never understand that. But it's sex is literally in everything. Shows, kids shows. That's why, like, my kids will not have phones. The tablets, you won't have tablets. I'm sorry. Because as parents, you have to shield your child from that and keep them as pure and, what's the other word? Like, pure, like, you don't want to take their innocence. Like, nowadays, like, their innocence is gone just like that because they know about sex from either their friends, social media,
their environment.
Like, it's everywhere. And I think that's really disgusting that sex is just so pushed among younger kids.
Yeah. I think you brought up a good point of how you saw how your childhood was and you don't want to repeat that cycle.
Yeah.
And I think that's good. Like, I guess I don't understand how a lot of people, and that's me coming from a 2-parent household, so maybe it's just something I don't see. Because a lot of times, I think it's the story of Oedipus, like where you're running from something and you run into it. Like, you're running away from it and you end up running into it. Mm-hmm. So like a lot of times people in their lives can try to avoid something and they end up stumbling into it anyway. So maybe it's a sense of that, but I don't necessarily like that idea because then that takes away any accountability of the person. But I think it's good for people that have come from those single parent backgrounds to step back and say, hey, I appreciate that my parents were able to raise me up into a successful adult, but I know that I don't want to repeat that cycle. So
Yeah.
even if I'm saving myself, even if it's not saving yourself, which I think is the best thing to do because it's foolproof.
Yeah.
Um, even if it's not saving yourself, I'm going to use protection to make sure that I don't have children out of wedlock. Um, so I don't know, but I also think too, like there's so much pressure on children now. Like when, like we were saying, when we were children, we didn't have to think about all that stuff.
Yeah.
But now kids are having to fight all these battles
Yeah.
and deal with all these problems because of the backgrounds that they're coming from. But if you could just hold out to build a stable foundation for your kids, then they could keep that purity and that innocence for a little longer.
Yeah.
Like I can look back at times, and again, like this is coming from a very more or less privileged background. Like we were not rich by any sense. Like we were not low class. We were middle class.
Yeah.
But, you know, like we had a good childhood. But I can look back and think of the times where I was not paying bills. Like I was just outside playing. Like did not have a care in the world. Carefree. Like why can't we give black kids that? Like I want my kids to have that carefree lifestyle. And of course, teaching them responsibility along the way, but not in a way that stresses and bogs them down. Like,
Yeah.
I don't want them to have that heaviness and that weight. And there's so many kids that say now, like, especially, you know, women who have multiple children out of wedlock, like the older ones usually have to raise the younger ones,
Yeah.
and they come to resent that parent in a way because they had to grow up and be an adult before they actually got to enjoy their childhood.
Yeah.
I don't want that for my child.
I feel like that's selfish. If you want to go ahead and give your body to different men and have children, you need to be able to raise them.
Yeah.
Like, it should not fall on the oldest child to raise your children.
Yeah.
But I also feel like, too, like, to a certain extent, like, who around you is making you feel like that's okay? Like, if you don't have, like, a friend or a parent, like, somebody around you is seeing you have multiple children and they're not saying anything to you. Like, they're not letting you know, like, hey, like, it's getting out of control.
Yeah.
Like, maybe talk to someone.
Who
like,
are your friends?
Like,
Who's
who's
your
going to be
family?
accountable?
Yeah. But, you know, the government, I'm all for government assistance when it's needed. But the government has played a role in that.
Yeah.
Because the more kids, I'm a tax preparer, the
Yeah.
more kids you have, those
more money you
refunds get into the crazy amounts, okay? And people look forward to that. A lot of times their refund is about the same amount as their salary. And it's not because they cannot earn more. It's because the government puts these standards on how much you can earn in order to get food stamps or in order to get any housing assistance.
Yeah.
So then people are like, well, why would I work harder if I'm going to lose these things? And I don't think there's a clean transition out of it. I think you can get into it easily, but I think once you get in it, you're meant to stay there.
Because it's essentially like, why would I, and some people say, like, why would I go to work if they're going to cut me off food stamps? Like, I'm getting free money for food.
Yeah.
So it's just a dangerous time that we're living in. It's really dangerous.
Yeah, but I think it's really important for us to, like, just take a step back and look at what's going on. I feel like it's really the responsibility of our generations to not repeat the cycle. But I don't know, like, do you genuinely believe that things can change?
I think things can change if we want them to change.
I think it will change forcibly, if that makes sense. So, if I can remember the quote right, it was something along the lines of rich men make weak sons. Or it was like rich men make weak sons make weak men. Weak men make strong sons. And it's like the cycle repeats itself. So, like, because your parents were good parents, then you kind of became coddled. So, you're not as strong as how your parents were. Then, as a coddled adult, you make a weak child. Then, that weak child makes that weak child sees that they have to basically get it out the mud. So, I don't know. It's kind of like the cycle repeats itself in that order. So, maybe that's gonna kind of how it is. I don't know. But I'm wondering, like, will a forcible change happen? Because now all these movements are coming. The red pill movement. People are saying they're incels, which is like involuntary celibacy. So maybe some of these things will get that ball moving to where things are kind of forcibly changed. Even men speaking out and saying,
Yeah.
hey, we don't value, I don't want to use the word value because women will take that word and run with it.
Yeah.
But we don't think it's a better when you have multiple sex partners. Like, we would prefer you to be more natural, no surgeries, wear more of your natural hair. But I also think, and men do say it, but I also think it's women saying those things as well.
Yeah, but I think it's how women will say it though. Like, you can't say it like a catty remark, and I think women do that to try to put other women down. Like, instead of saying it like as information or trying to help or uplift, they say it to like bring them down. Or like, if I see someone like with their body done, there's not gonna be a time where I would try to put that person down.
Yeah,
and I feel like a lot of women do that though. Like, they'll see a woman with a BBL and talk down on her about it and say like, "Oh, I have a natural body, so I'm better than you." I don't feel like that's right.
Yeah, no, it's not. And I think it just takes women being honest. Like, why is it that you felt the need to make those changes? Like, why did you not feel enough as you were? Or why did you take the easy route? Because for some people, they just don't want to work out. Like, working, and I think, again, going back to the social media, we look at the Kim Kardashians, the Nicki Minaj, the Cardi B, who have these very curvy hourglass bodies. In the times of like Halle Berry, Nia Long, Sanaa Lathan, just different, Whitney Houston, like, these women were beautiful, and each body type is different. Everybody was not an hourglass. Some people had more muscular builds. Some people had a more rectangular frame. Some people had a more pear shape, and that was okay. The importance was being the best version of you. And instead, we've made it, I want to be the best or as close as I can get to the Kim Kardashian body or the Nicki Minaj body. It's not, I want to be the best Abby's body. So I think once we kind of reset that and say, like, it's okay if you have a pear shape or a rectangular shape. It's okay if you have a flatter butt or bigger, whatever it is. Are you healthy? Because some men like different shapes. Every man doesn't like that body type. So, and I think too, we will kind of harp on men and say, like, well, y'all say y'all don't like the BBLs, but you still like their photos and whatever. But if that's all that we're making available to them, what other choice do they have? Like, they have to accept that.
It's becoming a new norm. I think that's kind of crazy too, because you're putting your life at risk when you're going up under these surgeries and you're getting your body worked on.
People are dying.
And a lot of times too, like, to a certain extent, if you're trying to get one and it looks natural, okay. But I feel like they're going out and they're getting like these humongous butts and it's not fitting your frame. So it's like you're putting all that work in to essentially look different, but it doesn't look good. And then, like, you get angry when nobody's like looking at you, but it's like you don't look human.
And I think another thing that's important to note too, like, you can get all these surgeries done, but your children are gonna come out with your body type or a mix of you and your husband's genetics.
Yeah. Like, how are you gonna tell them to get
are you gonna tell your child that they're not beautiful or they're not good enough because of the build that they have? That's why I think it's really important to accept how you were made. Now, if there's like major flaws or things that are like causing impairments to your livelihood, that's something different. And you have to make a note of those things because the people that will argue against it will be like, well, what if people have this and that? What if they can't breathe? No, we're not talking about people who can't breathe, can't hear. No, we're not talking about that. We're talking about unnecessary
body enhancements,
cosmetic surgeries that are purely for aesthetic, not for any type of health reason.
Yeah.
So for those that are purely aesthetic, I really don't agree. And people, again, can do whatever they want to do. But I encourage people to find the beauty within yourself and then make changes where you can. Like sometimes making simple adjustments to your diet, what you eat, how you work out, can adjust the proportions of your body to a certain extent. Yeah. So, like, if there is a more type of shape that you're looking for, you have to put in more work. But when you work for it, you're more likely to maintain it.
And I feel like it's better, like, you appreciate it more.
Yeah.
With a BBL body or like getting your body done, it's like, you're not, like, watching what you eat because you know you can get that sucked out.
Right.
Like, whereas, like, you're working for it, you want to maintain your body. You want to maintain the feeling you get from working out or, like, the happiness or whatever. Like, I just feel like it's getting your body done is the easy way out. Whereas you need to work for it and you might appreciate it more, or your spouse would appreciate it more that you took the time out and you actually worked towards a goal rather than just spending a couple $1,000 getting your body done.
I think our culture has promoted the removal of consequences for your actions.
Yeah.
And relating that to getting your body done, you can eat whatever you want.
Yeah.
But you're like, hey, I can just get this cut or nipped or snipped. And you won't tell that I was morbidly obese. Or you won't tell that I was eating a little too much that was causing me to have a gut. Or, when it comes to children, even abortions, like, we will say, it's okay if I have sex out of wedlock. And if I get married, that's fine. I can just, delete it. So I don't agree. I think a lot of times, like, we need to have those consequences there.
Yeah.
Like, the consequences of your actions is what forces you to change and accept what you've done. If every time you eat something bad for you, you see that you're gaining weight or you're having negative side effects, the only way for you to change is for you to see those side effects. Like, if you don't see the side effects, then you're going to think what you're doing is okay. And honestly, a lot of these things lead to premature death, especially when it comes to food and your eating habits and your workout habits. If you're constantly covering up the consequences of your actions, the repercussions, of your diet, then high blood pressure, diabetes, heart attacks, like
strokes,
which are prevalent in the Black community.
Yeah.
So, and a lot of these BBLs and cosmetic surgeries are prevalent in the Black community. So, I think we really need to take a step back. Well, I know we started at virginity and kind of took. But going back to the top, like, it all ties together.
Yeah.
I mean, I think there's a lot of value in keeping yourself for marriage because it branches off into all these other things.
Yeah.
Like, we started virginity, we talked about social media, we talked about children, we talked about families, how men see you. Like, just one thing. Like, if you just start at the root and say, like, I'm going to save myself for marriage because I see that it will give my kids a healthy environment. Mm-hmm. My husband will value me because I did that. I can help build up the Black community. Like, there are so many good things that can come from it. It's really worth doing.
Yeah.
And, like, even if you have been sexually active, it's never too late to say, I'm going to stop now.
Yeah.
So, and I know some men are kind of funny about saying, like, I'm going to stop being sexually active after I've done it. I don't agree, but again, I'm not a man. So, I don't know. But I think there's hope for everybody.
Yeah, honestly, I do have a little bit more respect for people who are sexually active and choose to stop doing that because it's easier. I feel like it is easier to not have sex if you haven't had sex. Like, it's easy for me to say, like, I'm a virgin and I'm not going to do it.
Mm-hmm.
But for someone who has did the act to stop and abstain,
Mm-hmm.
I think that is very commendable. And I don't think people give people who have had sex enough credit for that, because that does take a lot of willpower. Like you said, like, that's very, like, it shows self-control. And I think that's very commendable.
Yeah, I agree. I think it's a lot of self-control, and but
Yeah.
good episode. I think we talked about some good things.
Hopefully, guys, you guys like it and you take heed to what we said.
I'll take heed. No, but I'm not giving advice. Okay, but if I was giving advice, I think it's really important to teach your sons and your daughters to value their virginity and purity. Yeah. It's a cool thing. Like, it's a cool thing, especially in today's culture, to not be like everyone else. Like, if everyone else is out having sex and doing what they do, it's good to be different. So I encourage people, like, be different, be set apart, and find the value in yourself and your reasons for holding it. Holding out. But I don't know, any last words?
I think you touched on everything. I would just say, find the value in yourself. I think that's really, like, what I would say, like my biggest takeaway is, like, to find the value in yourself, learn to love yourself, like, forgetting about, like, the men and the women, like, if you're a man, like, forgetting about women, forgetting about men, like, learn to love yourself truly, like, take yourself on dates, like, wear things and do things for your satisfaction, not for anybody else. Yeah. And really just learn yourself, learn to love yourself, learn to love, like, all your imperfections, because if you don't, who's going to? Yeah.
Yeah, I think you made a good point to close out. I think it's so easy to point at someone else as the problem, especially in today's culture.
Yeah.
We'll save feminism for another episode.
Yeah.
Y'all got to tune in for that. But even from, like, feminism standpoint, and I think the extremists of the red pill community is honestly, like, the opposing force of feminism. But it's easy to look at men and say, men are the reason why I'm this way. And I think it's easy for men to look at women and say, they're the reason why I'm this way. But I think each person needs to look at themselves and say, how have I contributed to societal problems, and how can I be better? I think that's the only way that we're actually going to move forward. If everybody keeps pointing fingers at everyone else, it takes accountability away from yourself.
Yeah.
So I need to look at myself and say, Abby, how can you be better? How can you make sure the things that you see that you don't like, how are you not going to perpetuate that moving forward? So, yeah, but I think this was good.
Yeah.
This is our first episode. Okay. So tune in for episode 2. We don't know what we're going to talk about. We may have a different setup. It's our first time, but
just stay with us.
Pain and Purpose Podcast, y'all.
Make sure you like, comment, and subscribe. And share.
Bye.